Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto is Loved by the Fox Clan Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. October 10th. In a less traveled corner of the village, where only the shady characters dare dwell, there was a small group of people huddled into a small opening between some buildings. Today was not a typical day, it was a day of celebration. It was day of remembrance where everyone would gather for the festival and celebrate the fourth Hokage's great victory over the demon fox. For one lone person though, it was a day of fear and regret. You see, for today, he was turning 13. There was no celebration, no friends, and no gifts. Today, like every year during this day he would be fighting for his life. Unlike most years though, he was likely to lose this time. Screams of pain could be heard around the neighborhood, while people laughed at the reactions they were causing. This year he will not survive. The plague that has haunted this village will finally die this day, one man said triumphantly. I say we make him suffer first for all the pain he has caused. He killed too many people last time, they deserve to be avenged, another man said as he kicked the left knee of the small boy. A loud snap could be heard followed by another resounding scream. Scream all you like, demon brat, no one will save you this year. He lifted the small boy up by the throat, knowing the boy could not stand with his broken legs. He drew his arm back and quickly planted it into the boy's stomach, knocking the air out of him. Any chance of him screaming left, as the most he could try to do was gasp for the precious breath of life that chose to abandon him. Naruto slumped back to the ground in a heap. He could not move, as one of his arms has broken in several places, and his kneecaps were shattered. He felt like nothing more than a heap of broken flesh, one that was filled with nothing more than just the purest form of pain. If it wasn't for the demon fox within him he would have passed out long ago due to the agony. Finally, with the insurmountable pain coursing through his body, his mind started to slip into unconsciousness. Don't think you're just going to pass out on us just yet, a shrill voice of a woman bellowed. You are going to feel every ounce of justice that we have for you. It is the least I can do for what you did to my brother. The boy couldn't even make out what the people were saying around him. His mind was in tatters with everything that was happening to him. I say we carve off his human disguise to see the fox underneath, one man said while he approached the boy with a menacing-looking knife. He cut and ripped off the orange top of Naruto's jumpsuit. With his chest exposed, the man carefully started to fillet the flesh from Naruto's right broken arm. In a cheer of delight, the man held up a large strip of flesh while the others encouraged him for more. At that time a small girl was walking around with a package, looking for the intended recipient. This will be the year, Hinata, you can do it. Do not back down, you need to let him know how you feel. Even if he doesn't feel the same way, he deserves to know. Every year prior, since she was 7, Hinata had always placed a small gift on Naruto's doorstep for his birthday. This year she was not only going to give him the gift in person, but she was going to confess her feelings for him. She stood resolute in her quest, she only wished it would remain when she saw the blonde-haired boy. The young lavender-eyed girl rounded the corner near his apartment to the sounds of cheers and celebration. It was a day of celebration for the village's victory over the Kyuubi, but the festivities were nowhere near this area. As she walked closer to see what the celebration was about, she heard a sickening slap of something landing at her feet. Looking at where it had landed, she inspected what it was. She had a hard time making out exactly what it was. It was covered in dirt from where it had landed, and what seemed like blood. Upon closer inspection she could see the tan coloring, and the realization of what it was hit her in one nauseating motion. It was human skin. Looking up she saw a small group of people in a small semicircle. In the center of the circle was a heap of bruised and bloody flesh mixed in with the tattering or orange clothes. Naruto, she gasped in a whisper. A glint brought her attention to one of the people standing over him. He held a large knife above his head and was preparing to bring it down. Hinata did not know what got into her, but her body responded on pure instinct. She ran straight at the man, dropping her gift for the now dying boy halfway. As she approached with as much speed as she could get into her legs, she leaned her shoulder into the man, tackling him to the ground. The man lay on the ground trying to gasp for the air that the young kunoichi had robbed him of. Hinata laid there too, as she had failed to right herself upon impact. She looked to the orange heap, now having a better view of his condition. It was an unrecognizable mass of flesh, clothing and limbs. Naruto! She screamed, as she surveyed the damage. He lay there on his left side, halfway curled up, as it looked like his legs could not be pulled any closer because he could not control them. His right arm was bent and twisted in an unimaginable way, signaling that it had been broken in 3 or 4 places while being pulled from the socket. The worst part she saw was his face. It was swollen and bruised. The distortion of the features would have made him unrecognizable if it wasn't for his trademark blonde hair and orange taste in clothing. Breaking her attention from the features was his eyes. One was nearly swollen shut, and the other was half-lidded. The white was now blood red, as all the blood vessels in it had been ruptured. The blue orb that floated in that red sea gave every hint he was still awake and aware of what was happening to him. It was breaking her heart as she gazed into her long-time crush's eye. She saw something then she had never thought she would ever see in his eyes: total and utter defeat. Before she could stand again to help defend him, she was grabbed by one of the men there, lifting her up by the throat. "Look what we have here, the demon's little savior. The only woman there came into view, that is the little girl that follows him around, hiding in the shadows. I bet you love this demon bastard. Are you looking to become his demon slut? I bet he has already infected you. We will have to see if she is for ourselves now, won't we?" Another man said with a sneer. He walked behind her as he drew a sharp kunai from his side pouch. He slid it between the fabrics of her undershirt and skin, bringing it straight up, cutting the material from her small frame. The man, still tightly holding her by the throat, which she struggled against to keep air in her lungs, yanked the top of her outfit from her front and whistled. "Damn, look at that soft skin. I bet it feels nice. Too bad she is a little too young to sample." "Who said she is too young? Look at her headband. She is a shinobi. By law she is an adult," the man with a kunai responded. The other people that were present started to gather around her, licking their lips at the sight of the young topless girl. They've taken on mob mentality. There is no reason in their eyes, Hinata thought. She looked down at Naruto, who was trying to crawl to her with his one good arm. He barely moved at all, almost unnoticeable. Tears started to stream from her eyes, hoping that with all the attention now on her it would buy some time for anyone to find them. A new arrival came up to her, being held in the air, and started to yank her pants off. Her shinobi sandals fell off effortlessly, and soon the only article of clothing she had on was just her panties. "I bet she will be screaming for more once we are through with her." The woman then looked at her face, and recognition crossed her brow. It gave Hinata a sense of hope that she had finally come to her senses. "Isn't that the Hyuga heiress though? Hiyashi would kill us all if anything was to happen to her." If Hinata could cry any more she would, knowing that her father would probably be happy to finally be rid of her. Maybe the threat though of her father's supposed reaction would at least allow her and Naruto a chance to escape. "We will just tell everyone that the demon brat did it in a fit of rage. We only just happened by when we saw him kill her. We tried coming to her rescue and killed the fox demon, but we were too late. Hell, they will probably make us heroes for finally getting rid of him." The man behind her chuckled evilly at the idea, as he wrapped an arm around her and painfully gripped one of her developing. "I call first dibs," he stated, just as he started lick her face from her neck to her ear. She would have gagged and vomited if she could have, from the smell of sake coming off the man. "Save her," Naruto heard. It was a deep, throaty voice, one that spoke of hatred and malice. Naruto couldn't see where it was coming from. All he really heard at the moment was the muted sobs of Hinata in the mob's hands as they tried to descend upon her. Take my power and save her, the voice came again. How? It was as all he thought, not even able to speak. He didn't think he could talk. It seemed the mob that had caught up to him this time had crushed his larynx so he couldn't cry out for help. Take my power and save her now, the voice rang out in his head. Just as he heard the last syllable, he felt a wave of energy explode from his body. Let's make sure she can't get away or scream for help, the woman stated. Good idea. Wouldn't want our new toy to get away now, would we? Another man said as he lifted and braced her right leg. He brought his elbow down with all his weight on her femur. There was a loud snap as the bone broke in two. She cried out in pain the best she could, but the grip on her throat let out no more than a squeak followed by a sob. The man still holding her in the air by her neck took the cue and brought back his hand. With a closed fist and as much strength as he could muster, he swung forward to connect with her face. Several snaps and pops could be heard. It could be assumed that her jaw and nose were broken, with possibly even fractures through the rest of the right side of her face. In the next moment everyone came to a stop in what they were doing. A low guttural growl could be heard. They turned around to find the source and they paled at the sight before them. They parted enough that Hinata finally saw the source of the noise just before she blacked out. The heap on the ground that was once her beloved was glowing red, and then the darkness started to take a hold of her mind. Everyone's attention was drawn to their original target, and the cause for their celebration. The forgotten demon brat was oozing a red chakra from all over his body as 4 chakra tails swished violently behind him. What was left of the boy's skin started to melt off and his limbs started to move of their own free will. Cracking and popping could be heard from the bag of flesh as bones began to reset themselves and heal. It's the demon fox. Kill him before he can get to his feet, someone shouted. The man that was holding Hinata threw her behind him and she crashed into a wall. On impact a loud crack could be heard as more damage was done to her body. She fell silently to the ground in a mess that almost resembled her beloved. All at once they charged forward to get to the fox boy. As they neared him a wave of chakra exploded from his body as the last bones were healed. Due to the extreme pressure everyone was sent flying back, landing on the ground, splayed out like bodies from an unknown disaster. Naruto got to his feet with a cloak of protective red chakra encasing him. He surveyed the scene before him as people were scrambling to get to their feet. He looked over to the heap near a wall that was of nearly every article of clothing. Hinata, he thought. Just as a few of the attackers got to their feet, a dark feral growl escaped Naruto's mouth. With lightning-quick speed Naruto descended upon the group. He did not give any concern for their lives and started to tear at them, intent on seeing justice done. He would not leave a single person alive. Screams of horror erupted around him as body parts were flying in all directions. Even after every single one of them was dead he circled them all to ensure that there was no chance of saving a single soul. Naruto walked over to where Hinata was, reached down and picked up the young girl gently, as if he was holding the most fragile thing on earth. She is dying, Kit, came the single statement. Tears started to form in his fox-like eyes. What do I do? He said in a panic. You will do whatever I say if you want to save her. The QB started to relay instructions to the young boy. I can't do that, Naruto said fearful. If she is to live you must. Currently she is choking on her own blood from her broken nose. Her leg is broken as well. The worst of her injuries are her back and head, Kit. Her spine has been broken in 2 spots and there is severe bleeding starting to make its way to her brain. Even if she is found by medics, or you take her to the hospital, it is unlikely that she will even be able to function in society. You must do this now, it is the only way, the fox said in a matter-of-fact tone. Gritting his teeth he thought quickly. This is Hinata, a friend from the academy. She had her heart set on becoming a kunoichi and that was going to be taken from her. No, I can't allow it. I will do it. I have to, even if she hates me for it later. Naruto leaned down and could smell the tears she had shed while she was being attacked. The scent of her sweat was a salty pungent aroma that still held a faint hint of fear. Beneath it all he could smell her lavender fragrance. It was in her hair and all over her skin. From that point on he knew he could track her by her unique smell alone. With a slight hesitation he brought her chest to his mouth and bit into the fleshy part of her left, right over her heart. As he did so, he pumped his chakra into her system to kick-start her already failing coils. While doing so he looked upon her face and saw a slight wince of pain in her bruised features as his teeth penetrated her skin. Then it was replaced with a small smile, one that spoke of comforting warmth. When he removed his teeth he saw a little bit of blood mixed with red chakra pour from the 2 holes in her. As it did so, it started to snake around her, crisscrossing in multiple directions. When it finally stopped there was an image of a fox on her. Its eyes were the 2 holes that Naruto had made with his teeth, and its tail wrapped around Hinata's nipple. It was sitting there on her chest in a proud manner, as if it was the most regal thing to walk the earth. What is that? He thought to himself. Nothing you need to worry about for right now, Kit. At least not until the middle of winter, the fox thought to himself. All you need to know for right now is that she will be fine. Naruto looked around once again at the carnage he doled upon those that tried to hurt Hinata. What am I going to do about this? When everyone finds out what I did they will execute me. There was genuine fear in his thoughts, and the demon fox thought that it would be a justifiable emotion given how the village looked upon him. You are going to run as far as you can for right now. Get out of the village, leave and never look back, the Kyuubi stated plainly. But this is my home. It is where I want to live. My dreams are here, my dream of becoming Hokage, and protecting the people I care about, realizing that his dreams may have just come to a screeching halt with his actions here just moments ago. There was a deep snort within his mind as the Kyuubi chuckled malevolently. Dreams of being Hokage, protecting these people, living among the same people who beat you within an inch of your life and you still want to protect them. I don't know whether you are just naive or brain dead. Your dreams of greatness will not be found within these walls. After this last attack, there is no doubt in my mind that they will try this again. Feeling that the fox had won the argument he conceded, okay, I'll just drop Hinata off at home and we will leave. Bad idea, Kit. She has the Kitsune mark. They will see her just as you are, or even worse, they will see her as tainted by a demon like these fools and torture her. They may even rape or kill her. We should take her with us. Life in the village is over for her as well. The fox was speaking with a sense of urgency now. But I thought you said she would be okay. Naruto was growing angry. It wasn't only the thought of the Kyuubi lying to him, but more he thought of the villagers beating and maiming Hinata, driving his composure over the edge. She will be okay, Kit. She will live, that is all I said, but she will endure the treatment you have as long as she has that mark. Decide now, we must go. There are others on the way. Knowing their time was up he urged Naruto forward. Naruto, still in his four-tail form, held Hinata protectively to his chest. He started making his way to an area of the village wall that he knew the security was more lax. A small object caught his attention and he stopped to pick it up, inspecting it. This is a present. He read the name on the small package. It is for me. Why would someone give me a present? He then thought back. It was his birthday, that's why. Remembering the last few birthdays he has had, he would often find a present on his doorstep today. This one was wrapped in the same elegant white paper with lavender flower patterns like those of the past two. He looked down at Hinata. She was the one who gave me all those presents. But why would she do such a thing? There was a slight chuckle in his mind. It appears that this girl loves you. Probably has for quite some time. Naruto knew that what the fox was saying was probably true. He never thought someone could love him in his entire life. No one would ever love him, was what he always thought. Then he thought about what the people were saying when they attacked Hinata. They said she followed him around in the shadows, she was always too shy to tell him. Then they attacked her for the affection she had for him. Any hesitation he had about taking Hinata with him disappeared in an instant. He would protect her, the first person to ever open her heart to him. Looking to the sky, he let out a roar of pain that echoed throughout the village. He then sped off to the village wall and jumped it in one leap. His destination was unknown, but he was gone in a streak of red light. A short time later, Hiruzen stood at the window of his office looking over the village. He had just heard reports on the incident in the slums. The pictures of the area were gruesome, even for him, someone who fought in the Second Great Shinobi War. It was as if a wild animal had gotten into the village and torn some of the villagers apart. Limbs and entrails were spread throughout the entire scene. There were a few questions still in the air that eluded him. There was a set of clothes that looked like they were once worn by a young girl, but no body that would fit it was found. There was that enormous spike in chakra that most people who had any understanding of it felt. It was demonic in nature, and many of the veterans in the area claim it felt as if it was the same chakra the nine-tailed fox possessed. Just before the chakra signature faded and the Anbu arrived on scene, there was a large animalistic roar that shook the windows throughout the village. They had no idea what had happened, but they finally had a lead. A small girl who was in one of the apartments that overlooked the scene was found. Unfortunately, the young girl was in shock and could not speak due to the trauma she witnessed. She was currently at the interrogation department so Inoichi could scan her memories of the event to provide the answers they sought. It had been several hours since the scan started, and the Hokage started to grow concerned over the time it had taken. The council had already assembled, but Hiruzen refused to call the meeting to order until the report was completed. A knock was heard at the office door, and the Hokage finally sighed in relief. "Enter," he said, and watched the Yamanaka clan head enter. There looked to be something wrong with the man, as he appeared to be several shades paler than the old man could remember. "Are you feeling fine, Inoichi-san?" he stated out of concern. The blond man made his way to the desk, wobbling the entire time. "Yes, Hokage-sama. There were a few complications during the scan, and you have my apology for the extra time needed to get you the report. The complications happened to be the sickly-looking man losing his constitution after returning to his own mind. Never in all his life had he ever seen the atrocities that the small child had witnessed. He would have normally just received the information he needed and reported back to the Hokage. But he had experienced so much trauma looking at the memories that he couldn't leave the young girl there any longer with them. It took him near a half hour to recover. The damage to her mind was so great he couldn't remove the memory, but he diminished the effects as much as he could. He placed the report on the Hokage's desk and waited for the questions to follow. Standing in front of his chair, Hiruzen started to read the report. It didn't take but a moment before his knees gave out and he collapsed into his chair. The old man started to think he was turning green and his light lunch was threatening to make a second coming. "Are you sure you're not over-embellishing things here, Inoichi?" The blonde just shook his head. "No, in fact it may be understated, as the details gathered into the memories of a child are not as great as they are normally found in adults." "And what about the girl?" Thinking that there would definitely be extenuating damage to the girl's mind after seeing all this. "I wasn't able to remove the memories, there was just too much damage. I was only able to lessen them. Currently she is in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. With a few years of therapy she should be fine." He only hoped he would be. Hiruzen just nodded. "The council has assembled. I can understand if you don't want to attend after your assignment here. I will attend as well. I don't think anyone in that room will understand what happened by just reading the report," Inoichi said. The two made their way to the council meeting room where you could hear yelling from the moment they turned down the hall. Hiruzen took his place, standing in front of his chair, while Inoichi sat with the Shinobi Council. The Shinobi Council was sitting quietly waiting for the report. The Civilian Council was demanding blood for the murders of several of the villagers. "Enough," demanded Hiruzen, slamming his hand on the table to get everyone's attention. He passed out copies of the report. As everyone was reading the pages, the Hokage studied the expression on their faces. "So the demon brat did do this. We need to hunt him down and finish him off," Mebuki shouted as she skimmed over the report. Hiruzen glared at the blonde-haired woman. Mrs. Hirano, you will watch your tongue when you speak of the boy. That boy, as you call him, murdered several people. I saw the pictures and it looked as if a bear walked into the village and shredded them, she returned. More of the civilian council agreed and started to demand that Naruto be brought to justice. They were trying to skin him alive for crying out loud, he bellowed. It is what he deserved, I am sure of it. He has been nothing but a plague on this village since he came into existence, another man yelled. From the memories we had gathered from that young child, Naruto was just content on letting them kill him. He didn't even react to the beating they gave him. He did nothing until the young Hinata Hyuga was in danger. Does that sound like the monster you think he is? Hiruzen sighed, hoping they would see the logic. Irrelevant, as to the reason he attacked those villagers. The way he treated those bodies is nothing short of inhumane. It looked as if he played with their organs and made sure he ripped their limbs off. They found a leg buried into a wall by 6 inches. I dare you to tell me that isn't the work of a demon, Mebuki returned. The old man felt a little bile float to the back of his throat as he recounted the scene he inspected. Swallowing hard, he steadied himself once again. They beat the young girl within an inch of her life. What is worse than that, they were all making an attempt to rape her, a 13-year-old girl who was about to graduate from the academy tomorrow. Everyone looked to Hiyashi as he had not said a word about his daughter's attack. He looked at everyone staring at him and shrugged his shoulders. In all honesty, it would have done me a favor if they just killed her. My only regret is that I didn't put the caged bird seal on her before this all happened. She was weak and inferior to the Hyuga name. All the shinobi in the room gasped at the cold reaction of the Hyuga head. A slap of wood was heard as Inoichi stood up quickly, slamming his hand onto the table with his chair falling to the floor. How dare you, you heartless son of a bitch! His emotions were still raw at what he had seen. His mind was still in a flurry as he thought it could have just as easily been his daughter. That is your daughter, and all you have to say is that it would have been a benefit if she had died there after being used like nothing more than a child's plaything in the worst of ways. Stoically, Hiyashi sat there with a little anger running through his eyes that someone would dare speak to him in such a way. Do not misjudge me, Inoichi. This turn of events does give me cause for concern. It seems that the brat kidnapped her from the village. I do not know whether she is alive or not, but I hope she is the latter and no one finds her body. If someone was to get their hand on her unsealed eyes, it could be disastrous for my clan. That was the straw that broke the camel's back in Inoichi's mind. He lunged at Hiyashi, seething with rage. The only thing that stopped him was his former teammates, Shikaku and Choza. Your daughter was beaten and broken, then they were going to defile her, and all you can think about is protecting your precious Byakugan. You even have the nerve to call yourself a father. I hope your youngest learns the truth about you, you soulless bastard. With all this information about the incident and the one person who tried to save her, you side with the civilian council in calling the boy a monster. Take a look in the mirror, high and mighty Hyuga-san. The only monster or demon I see right now is the one in front of me. Every bit of venom he could muster went into those words, and even his friends feared for their well-being should their blonde teammate push a little more strength into his attempt to dismember the pale-eyed clan head. Straightening himself, Inoichi shrugged off his friend's hold as he turned to the Hokage. I think you're right, Hokage-sama. I do not feel as if I am up to attending to the council this evening. My previous mission has taken a lot out of me and I fear that I may not be able to control my actions as of right now. We all know we wouldn't want another demon running around the village right now, as I am feeling the loss of my compassion for humanity right now, and there are a few people that I wouldn't mind adding to that body count, he said while glaring at the civilian council. If you would please excuse me, I will take my leave. Hiruzen nodded, and it seemed as if you could hear a pin drop until the door closed behind Inoichi. Then everyone exploded into an uproar, making demands. A migraine was quickly forming in the old man's head. That is enough, he bellowed to get everyone's attention. It is very late as it is, and we will continue this tomorrow. Meeting adjourned until then. What about the demon brat? He is still out there running loose, and a very real threat to the village. We should send out the Anbu right now to hunt him down and kill him, said Mebuki. I said this meeting was adjourned. Do not think you have the power to make such demands of my shinobi, you madam do not. If you are that scared, I suggest you run back home and lock all your doors, turn off all your lights, hide under your sheets, and pray to Kami that the demon does not find you. After that response, the Hokage turned and left the council chambers, only to hear more arguing from both sides. Hokage Tower. The last of the night sky had just disappeared over the horizon, giving way to the morning. One person had seen it come and go, as sleep for the night was not an option. Of course, there was work to be done in preparation for the next day, but his mind would not allow him sleep. Even when he had tried, his mind would conjure images of the scenes of yesterday's brutality. Not only had sleep been kept from him, but also eating seemed impossible. Anytime he would think of or look at the pictures, bile would rise to the back of his throat, threatening to bring some imaginable contents with it. The stress on his mind was taking a physical hold on his body. Looking over the file again, as he had done most of the night, he strained his eyes looking for any clue that would lead him to the whereabouts of the two missing academy student. It has been nearly 18 hours and they still haven't found them. Not to be unexpected really, it took half the Anbu to catch him during some of his more elaborate pranks, Hiruzen thought to himself. Still though, they should have found something. From the reports, Naruto was severely injured and carrying Hinata as well. That should have slowed him down. Naruto must have tapped into the fox's chakra to make such a recovery and disappear so fast. How much could he have used? Did he lose himself to the demon? If he did, it would be unlikely that they find the girl alive. Since they haven't found her body, it is likely that he did not succumb to the fox's influence. Not much could go worse at this point for the Hokage. Not only did he have to deal with the attack yesterday, he also had to assign search teams to look for them. His plans for team assignments of the soon-to-be graduating genins were completely thrown out the window and he had made new listings. Even if they did find the two, it would be unlikely that they would be approved for team assignment, and be held for next year, that is if he could keep the council from interfering. There was also the cleanup of the village after last night's overzealous celebration. Word had spread rapidly throughout the village that the demon brat had left the village for good, and the villagers had celebrated in a more intense way than they would have normally done during the Kyubi festival. There were a few burned buildings, trash was thrown everywhere, many people were now held in the Anbu containment facilities. Deadly fights broke out, and the medical staff was more than busy trying to heal those who'd been caught in the more harmful festivities. Hiruzen sighed deeply as he heard the window behind him open. This was something he was not looking forward to. He knew the time was near, past due in fact, but he had hoped that with the current events, fate would be kind to him and give him some sort of relief. Fate had no intention of being so kind. It's good to see you, sensei. The white-haired Sannin said to the Hokage. I didn't expect you to be up this early when I returned to the village, but as I was on my way to the I mean to expand my research, I saw the light was on. So I figured I would hand in my report and go check on my godson. I know I missed his birthday yesterday, but he was fine with all of his friends celebrating with him. I don't think he would like an old man like me embarrassing him, he said with a boisterous laugh. At the mention of the man's godson, Hiruzen stiffened like that of a board. This was not going to be easy. The Sannin had been away for 13 years, and had planned on coming back to celebrate Naruto's birthday, and watch him earn his genin rank. Before the incident, Hiruzen had even placed the blonde on the team his father's student was to teach. He thought that Kakashi, being the Yondaime's student, he would be the best candidate to teach the boy. Jiraiya noticed the tensing of his sensei and walked around to the front of the desk to lounge in a chair. You look like crap, old man. I can see why after seeing the state the village is in. Looks like the festival went a little out of control. You know, I never really liked it. Seemed like they were celebrating Minato's death just as much as the containment of the Kyuubi. The only thing that makes up for it is the fact that Naruto is celebrated as a hero for it all, I guess. Hiruzen slowly shook his head, not saying a word the entire time, waiting for the worst to come. He had purposely failed to mention Naruto's treatment to his godfather because of the need of his work in his spy network. If he knew how his godson was treated, then he would have rushed back to take care of the boy himself. It was a selfish thing to do, but it was what was best for the village. Jiraiya got a confused look on his face as the old man shook his head and slid a folder toward him. He picked up the folder and hesitantly opened it and started to read the contents. The reaction was almost instantaneous. His body became rigid and rage could be felt throughout his whole body. It wasn't from his heart, or his core, but his whole body. He had become nothing but one big tense muscle, fueled by rage. His body went through several changes as he read further. The acts and atrocities committed against his student's son, the hero's progeny, made him pale. Jiraiya had tortured his share of people in his line of work, probably enough so they would nominate Ibiki for sainthood in comparison. The acts committed against the child would be seen as something only a demon could do. Where is the rest of it? He said through gritted teeth when he neared the end of the file. In a quieted tone, I don't give a damn what you think right now. He yelled. I want the rest of his file. If I don't get it, there is no one in this village to stop me from tearing it apart to find it. I don't know how you could let this happen to him. You willingly ignored his parents' dying wish, and this is how the village responds in kind. Hiruzen got up from his chair and went to a picture frame that contained the Yondaime's image and removed it. Behind the picture was a small safe that he opened and withdrew a folder that looked more like a large section of the encyclopedia. Putting everything back in place, he returned to his desk and set the safe contents down in front of his former student. Not saying a word, he allowed the man to look through the contents. As Jiraiya looked through the folder, skimming page after page, he thought that this had to be a joke. In the folder were pages from hospital visits, Anbu detainment memos, civil complaints, more hospital visits, and even a few pages concerning his ejection from the orphanage. He closed the folder and put it into his bag, not wanting to return the file until he could spend some time reviewing it all. When he had returned his gaze to Hiruzen, there was a fire of destruction seen in his eyes. What the hell happened here, old man? I don't want to hear any damn excuses, or apologies. You sent me on this assignment 13 years ago, giving me your word you would watch after him. I return today to find out that rabid animals have been treated better. Things are complicated where he is concerned, the Hokage stated. It didn't seem anything that he was going to hear was going to quench his rage, and the words from his old sensei were not even causing steam. Complicated my ass. He was less than a year old when he ended up in the hospital for the first time, for apparent blunt force trauma. How does a 1-year-old suffer blunt force trauma in a one-story orphanage? The aging man winced at his student's words. He remembered the incident. The boy looked as though he was nothing more than one big bruise, while blood trickled from his nose and ears. Shame filled him anywhere Naruto was concerned. He failed in his promise to protect the boy. Defeated, he responded, Don't you dare say you're sorry. You have no right to try to apologize to me for the horrors this kid went through. I tell you what, why don't you try apologizing to Minato and Kushina? Let's see how well they receive it. Apologize to the kid. He was the fourth son, for crying out loud. You didn't even have enough respect for him to ensure that his kid was safe. You really are a piece of work. Now look here, Jiraiya, the Hokage tried to exert some authority. You have been gone for the last 13 years. On a mission you sent me on, with the assurance that you would care for him, the Sannin interjected. Yes, I know, but it still does not change the fact that things have changed here in Konoha. The village does not operate as it once did, he continued, slamming his hand on the desk to make his point. No shit, it doesn't. But from the last thing I remembered here, you at least had some authority and a will to use it for the good of the village. But obviously you couldn't do that, because you couldn't even care for Naruto. Or is it you cared more about the village than the child that helped save it? This village wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for him. We have councils that override me from time to time, especially where Naruto is concerned. They have looked to the boy as an excuse for anything that is wrong in their lives. I have done the best I can with what I have. He knew he was wrong. There were other things that could have been done, but the consequences were unpredictable. There was nothing that he heard from his sensei that was going to make him understand. You haven't done shit, obviously. And what is this about councils? Last I knew you were the Hokage, you had the final say in everything, council's approval or not. You have fallen, old man, you were known as the god of shinobi, now you're nothing more than a joke-playing politician. Just tell me where he is, I will get him, and we are leaving the village until I can find a reason to return this time. The insults were warranted, and he accepted them for his failing. His student was right. He could have executed complete authority over every decision concerning Naruto, but chose not to in fear of repercussions of the civilian council's threats. Letting out a sigh, he stated, "We don't know where he is at the moment." What do you mean you don't know where he is? It's been nearly a full day and you still haven't found him. Jiraiya was getting ready to explode. All he wanted to do was take his godson away from this hellhole, and now fate had determined that it was not an option right now. In the report it stated that he used the Kyuubi's chakra in defending the girl, and then leapt away. We think he left the village, but no one reported seeing him leave. Hiruzen returned. With these injuries he should be in ICU for the next 6 months, he said in disbelief. Thanking some unknown force he was able to at least shed some good news to his student. Most of his injuries heal in about a day, 2 at most. Only the most severe injuries will take near a week. We think this is because the demon's chakra is healing him. Jiraiya laughed at the thought. Seems ironic, doesn't it? The demon fox who tried to destroy this village is healing the child that the village is trying to destroy. If he is reaching this level with the fox's chakra, he is likely talking to him too. Considering the fact that you kept everything from him, if the fox shares Naruto's origins with him, I wouldn't be surprised at all if he releases the fox of his own free will to destroy this village. They would deserve it after what they have done to the child. Jiraiya got up from his chair and made his way to the window. I will go look for him myself, and you better hope I can find him before any such notion does happen. When and if I return with him, things will change around here, starting with Naruto's heritage being revealed. Then I will handle that damned civilian council myself. With those last words and leaving the Hokage with his head hung low, Jiraiya set out to look for his godson. Late in the morning, a single blood-curdling scream sounded throughout the forest. The wildlife in the area tried to quickly escape the threat that was sure to follow such a noise. Birds took to the skies as deer bounded for deeper brush, and forest rodents quickly tried to make it to their burrows before whatever made the sound came after them. The sound was coming from just inside the entrance of a small cave, where a girl could be seen sitting up frantically waving her arms and kicking her feet, trying to ward off any would-be attackers. What made the sight more noticeable was that there were no attackers to be seen anywhere. When her eyes finally opened, she looked around frantically trying to see where she was. She was just inside a cave and saw the cave wall just behind her. Quickly she scooted on the ground to place her back against the wall as her mind raced through information. As she kept trying to see where she was, she would likely see what she last remembered. Faces came to the forefront of her mind, and as they did she would flinch in fear. She could hear their laughs in her ears and the things that they were saying. She pulled her knees up to her chest and tried rocking herself into some semblance of comfort. Much to her dismay, the vision still assaulted her mind and convulsions ripped through her body. Suddenly she turned her head and released the contents of what remained in her stomach. Sadly, it wasn't much given the time since she last ate, and as a result her throat burned with the acid bile that escaped. She could still feel the kunai separating her clothes from her skin, and a man's hand gripping her tightly, causing pain. The memories of the attack came back one after another, and there was a sharp pain in her leg where another man had broken it. Even the memory caused her to release another scream into the open cave. She tried to throw up again as she could still smell the sake-soaked breath of a man that had licked her face and was thrown into convulsions, with the only result being that of dry heaves. Pain coursed through her face when the memory of a man who had struck her crushed the side of her head. Hinata covered her face with her hands waiting for the memory to give way. It was then that she started to realize something was off. Feeling her face with her hands, she expected to feel actual pain and disfigurement, not just the memory. The skin wasn't even tender to the touch as what normally came with a bruise. Scenes of the attack crossed through her mind as reality of her whereabouts started to come into focus. It was as if two realities were switching back and forth. Looking down at her legs, she started to notice that she wasn't wearing any pants, and as a result she started to feel the coldness of the cave floor against her skin. She gently reached down and touched the once broken leg to find that there was no pain there as well. Cautiously she moved it and found the operation was unhindered. Her skin was soft and unmarred, a stark contrast to what her mind was telling her that it should be. Out of the bottom of her vision she could see some orange, and another wave of memories passed through her. Memories of the battered and beaten body of the one person she cared about more than all else in the whole world. Naruto, she silently said as a wave of tears and shakes took a hold of her. Trying to push through her tormented mind, she looked at the orange and noticed that it was her beloved one's jacket. It was draped around her shoulders and currently the only thing keeping her warm. It was splashed with a large amount of dried blood, giving it a discolored look and stiffness. The right sleeve was missing, causing her to remove it from her right shoulder to get a better look at it. Her shirt and bra were missing, allowing her to be exposed for all of nature to view. Through a sigh of relief at viewing her body, she took a small bit of solace when there wasn't a mar across any of her skin besides the little bit of dirt from being on the cave floor. That was until she noticed a small drawing over her left. Taking a finger, she tried to rub at it to see if it could be wiped away. When she did so, a dull pain spread across it, but it would not smear. Her was tender to the touch, and the image which she now noticed looked like a fox. The ink used must be permanent as it did not simply wipe away. She tried to push it to the back of her mind, thinking that she can try to remove it later. Now that the memories were becoming just that, she needed to find out where she was. Hinata put on the jacket properly, sliding her arms through the sleeve and torn hole, trying to retain some of her modesty. Zipping up the jacket as much as she could, she started to stand on shaky legs, making her way out of the cave. When she reached the mouth, she scanned the dense forest for anyone around. The last she knew was that she was in Konoha. Now here she stood in a large forest where vegetation grew unhindered. The canopy was thick and kept a lot of the sun's intense rays from reaching the ground. It was as if the entire forest floor was shrouded by clouds, while the few spots of light to get through brightened the area, giving everything a deep rich color. Quickly scanning the forest floor, she saw a bit of orange that was out of place a few yards from where she was standing. Making her way to it, she recognized the item, and more importantly what it was on. As quickly as she could with bare feet, she made her way over to it. Kneeling Son, she started to examine the body in front of her. He was face down and unmoving, causing Hinata to start shedding new tears. His clothes were tattered with small cuts and holes. Blood had coated some of his clothing, and then the strangest thing occurred to her. The clothing was covered in blood, but his hair and exposed skin had no injuries or blood on it. From what she could recall of seeing him back in the village, he should be dead, and looking at him now you would think so as well, as he was not moving. His body should be littered with damage and trauma. His limbs were twisted during the attack and should have been bent in a distorted way here. Like her, he bore no signs of injury, and one would assume he was in perfect health. This had to be an illusion or genjutsu, she thought. Releasing a small amount of chakra from her system to try to dispel any such trick, she noticed nothing was changed. This was reality. Gently she grabbed his shoulder and rolled him over toward her to see if the front of him would give any clues as to what had happened. He still had on his pants, and was wearing his black undershirt. He was missing one shinobi sandals. The result was the same, aside from his clothes looking like he'd been in a battle to the death he was unharmed, not even a bruise. A little bit of dirt clung to him because he was lying on the forest floor. Not waiting to see if her fears were true through time, she nudged him gently at first, then a little harder as small amounts of time passed. Naruto-kun, Naruto-kun. Wake up. Please wake up. The longer he remained still, the more panicked she got as tears streamed down her face. At this rate she would likely dehydrate from crying so much. Finally he let out a small moan, one that would make someone think he would want to sleep in for the day. Slowly the sleep started to wear off and he heard someone calling his name. The closer to the real world he got, the more of the past events started to fill his mind. Suddenly he shot up, startling Hinata, causing her to almost fall back. Hinata-chan, he cried out as his eyes popped open then closed again as the light from the surrounding forest left him with morning blindness. He started blinking rapidly to get used to the light while scanning the surrounding area. His eyes finally came upon the girl that was next to him. It was her voice calling to him. Hinata-chan. He shouted again and leapt at her, pulling her into a hug. Her body stiffened from the sudden contact with Naruto, then slowly started to relax and melt into him. Before she knew what she was doing, she had wrapped her arms around him and was hugging him just as tightly. It was as if her body was responding to his and it was working of its own free will. In the past she would just faint even if he looked at her or paid her the smallest amount of attention. This was a new sensation for the pale-eyed Hyuga, and one she hoped would continue. Reluctantly she pushed herself away. The need for answers was more powerful than her need of being held by the blonde. What happened to us, Naruto-kun? Where are we, and how are we not injured? I think I saved you when they attacked you. As far as being hurt, I usually heal quickly, a day or two at most. I don't know how you. He trailed off as a memory came to the surface. A blush quickly appeared on his face as he relived the memory. I bit you, he said quietly, looking at the young girl's chest. Hinata strained her ears as she tried to pick up on what Naruto had said. Finally she was able to understand what escaped his mouth and a slow process started in her mind. I'm fine though, she said. Continuing, I don't have a mark on, she trailed off. Slowly she pulled the top of the jacket forward slightly to look at her left. The image of a fox was still there with its tail still wrapped around her pink nipple as if it was guarding it. She then lifted her head to look at the blonde who was slightly looking away, but maintained the eye contact still. Hesitantly he nodded and it told her how she got the marking, just not how it appeared. Looking back at it she thought to herself that she should have been horrified and maybe even feel violated. Quite the contrary though, images of Naruto's mouth on her skin sent waves of warmth through her body. Her temperature started to rise as blood pooled in her face with the thought of his lips kissing her skin as he held her. Shaking her head she tried to come back to reality. I is T that what H healed me. Hinata said in a deep stutter, trying to push the warming sensation in her body to the back of her mind. He slowly nodded as his face was reddening by the moment. He felt ashamed for what he had done. I don't know why or how, but something told me to, or else you would die, he trailed off, horrified at the thought of her being broken and dying. Hearing the hurt in his voice she placed a hand on his shoulder to try and reassure him. Thank you Naruto-kun. Hearing the sincerity in her voice caused him to whip his head around, but I hurt you Hinata-chan. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. She tightened her grip on him to add strength to her words, you have nothing to be sorry for. She wasn't sure if that was true, but for now it is what he needed to hear, and she wanted to be what he needed. They were strange feelings to her, not knowing where they came from. It was true that she had a deep crush on him, and very possibly loved him more than she knew before the incident, but what had happened seemed to amplify those emotions. What you did may have very well saved my life, she said sternly. Is the mark still there? He asked, hanging his head. She nodded and thought of the image some more, with actual fondness now. It had come from her Naruto-kun. Suddenly Naruto whipped his head around, looking in every direction. This caused a little panic to rise in the young Hyuga. What's wrong? Hinata asked. Naruto heard a voice in his head. It had said, "Run," in a deep guttural voice. He was not sure where the voice had come from but looked around for the source. He then remembered hearing a voice when he tried to get to Hinata when the mob had attacked her. He thought it was just a result from his trauma, and let it go. Now he was hearing it as plain as day. You need to run, the voice said again. Who's there? Naruto said aloud, still looking for the source. This caused even greater confusion from the girl as she started to look around, but nothing could be seen. There are people coming in this direction. They are likely coming to take you back. If you don't move soon, they will discover where you are. The voice said again. What is so bad about that? I have to go home eventually, and I'm sure that Hinata-chan wants to see her family, the blonde said. Hinata had a mixture of feelings run through her at those words. Despite their current conditions, she was happy to be with the boy. She also had family she cared about back in the village that she would like to see. At least to let them know she was alright, but the images of her father caused her to shiver in fear slightly as his coarse words played in her head. What she was feeling the most right now was concern as she watched her beloved talk to an invisible person. Quit talking aloud and just think what you have to say. You are scaring the girl. I can smell her fear. She has a deep-seated concern for you. Naruto looked over at Hinata and could see the worry in her eyes. He just nodded in response as the voice continued. Do you remember what you did to those people yesterday? Do you honestly think they will allow you to live after the carnage you created with those bodies? If they don't outright kill you, they will definitely not let you live any sort of normal life. Her life will become what yours has been with the marking upon her chest. They will examine her and they will deem her as demon-tainted and throw her out just as you have been. Naruto paled as he remembered the bodies of his attackers being torn to shreds. His rage had caused him to lose control and he took it out on those people. He tore them limb from limb, often using an arm or leg as a weapon to beat another person with. He started to turn green and he saw clawed hands, possibly his, slash at the midsections of a few, their insides falling to the dirty ground. One person happened to take a step back after a swing and only had a small but deep gash. The woman frantically tried to catch her insides and push them back as he leapt at her again, this time grabbing her head and slamming it to the ground. The impact was punctuated by the cracking of the skull while the eyes and parts of her fleshy pink brain erupted from the eye sockets due to the overwhelming pressure. Naruto rolled over onto his hands and knees in a fit of dry heaves. When they had stopped, he looked at Hinata, whose concern for him had only grown. He then knew that what the voice said was most likely true. His death didn't matter much, but he would not let Hinata, who had been one of the few people that ever showed kindness to him, suffer for anything he had done. Naruto got to his feet as his legs shook. Looking down at Hinata, who was still kneeling, he began to remove his pants. Hinata couldn't believe what she was seeing. She started to back away from him, knowing something had transpired within his mind. What are you doing, Naruto-kun? She eeped out. Even though she was young, she had thoughts of them being romantic at some point in their lives. It was even one of her greatest fantasies and often played in her dreams, but here and now, she was not sure how to react. He looked down at her once again as her words sunk in. He gulped at the sight of her pushing herself away from him. Her legs were in front of her and were slightly parted, giving him a full view of the only original clothing she still had, her underwear. He quickly turned away with deep red cheeks and told her what he was doing. You can't go around looking like that. He tried to sound indifferent, but inside he liked what he saw, and didn't know exactly why. Looking down at herself, she realized that she wasn't wearing any pants, something she totally forgot about. She started to feel woozy knowing that with her legs in front of her now, Naruto could see her most intimate parts aside from her panties. It was a double reaction, both coming from her mind and her body. Her body closed her legs and drew them in from the embarrassment, but her mind and body were also rebelling by causing a wave of heat spreading to her once exposed womanhood. She had to look away and focus on breathing to keep herself from fainting. Out of the corner of her eye she saw Naruto's pair of pants hanging in front of her. Turning her head, she reached up to her only hope of covering herself. She noticed Naruto standing in front of her in his black t-shirt and a pair of blue boxers with toads on them. She started to giggle a little and stopped herself when the blonde looked at her in embarrassment. Quickly she got to her feet and put on the pants, while she noticed Naruto removing his single shinobi sandal. Something tells me there are people on their way here right now, thinking of the voice in his head. They are coming to take us back to Konoha as far as I can tell. Hinata-chan, I won't make you come with me, but I can't go back. Not after what they did to me last time. Hinata's eyes widened as the tenses of those words rang through her head. You mean there were other times? Her temper started to rise at the thought of the villagers doing this to her Naruto-kun time and time again. She knew the villagers looked down on him, called him names, and even sometimes threw rocks at him, but to maim him repeatedly over and over again. He looked away from her, trying to keep her from seeing the shame in his eyes, and he nodded. This happens every year on my birthday. Most of the time I would just get a beating, but this time was the worst. I thought I was actually going to die this time. Suddenly he felt as if someone was trying to squeeze the life out of him. The moment he felt the trembling and heard the sobs, he knew it was Hinata. It was strange, he had never been hugged before, nor had someone ever shown true concern or cried for him. But here was this shy girl he knew from the academy, doing both. He stood there frozen as he tried to think about it. He decided to accept it and turned around in her arms to return the hug. He felt warm and safe in her arms, along with something he couldn't describe due to the lack of experience. Gently he pushed her back to get her attention. Thank you, Hinata-chan. They are almost here and I must leave before they spot me. He started to walk away but was stopped in his place by a small hand holding onto his arms. He looked at her, seeing the tears roll down her face. Hinata was shaking her head vigorously, trying to say something. Not wanting her to strain herself in thought, he responded, I have to. Hinata-chan, you saw what they did to me, to you. I won't go through that again. Shaking her head more violently, she spoke, finding the words she was looking for. You can't go, not without me. She was crying and she couldn't control it. The problems she had with her family seemed minuscule compared to the life he had. She knew her family had casted a downward eye upon her, thinking she was weak, but they had never beaten her out of sheer enjoyment, or with an intent to kill her. Hinata-chan, he said in a whisper. Because I love you Naruto-kun, she eeped when the words she had been longing to say to her beloved escaped her lips. Her eyes grew as large as saucers and her cheeks turned bright red as if the sun had burned them. Seeing the look of shock on his face, she took advantage of her newfound courage and leapt forward. Quickly, before she could lose her resolve, she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulled herself up to him, kissing him directly on the lips. Much to her surprise, he wrapped his arms around her waist and pulled her in close, adding his own pressure. Naruto was unsure what he was doing. All he knew was that the girl in front of him confessed her feelings for him, and kissed him. He wasn't sure if he was just reacting to her actions or if it was something he was feeling deep inside for her. Whatever it was, he did not want it to stop. Longing for the idea of being loved, and to have someone pour out their emotions to him, it was at least a chance to grab onto a dream he never hoped to wake from. Soon they parted, still holding each other though, and he nodded. He took Hinata by the hand and they left the area, hoping to put some distance between them and those that looked to take them back. The academy. 7 young students filled the classroom, chatting loudly as they waited for their soon-to-be ex-teacher to enter the room, giving them insight to what their future may hold. They had all passed the genin exam, and today they would officially be known as ninja. Adults in the eyes of the village, they will be further trained in the arts of the shinobi, becoming employees of the village, and assassins. Most will live their lives in secrecy, their deeds never known to the village, while some may become known for their greatest of accomplishments, legends in their own right. All hoping to have their dreams come true, whatever those may be. For one young dark-haired boy, it was a step closer to gaining the power he needed to achieve his desires of vengeance. Brooding, he was trying to ignore the people around him, as he thought upon his goals. Sitting on one side of him, yelling across to the other side, sat a pink-haired girl who had been trying to talk to the boy until she was interrupted by her former friend and her now greatest rival. They continuously fought for the boy's attention and affection. Today was no different than it had been in the past. Just you watch, Ino Pig, I will be on Sasuke-kun's team. The pink-haired one's voice bellowed. Face to face they argued across the boy's lap. Not a chance, billboard brow. Besides, if you haven't noticed, there are only 7 of us here, the blonde girl said sharply. Not understanding what her rival was getting at, she snapped back, what is that supposed to do with anything? Realizing that the smartest girl in class hadn't figured it out yet, Ino continued to poke at her with a proverbial stick. Each team is made up of 3 genin billboard. With only 7 here, there are only enough students to make 2 teams. That means someone will have no team and will have to wait until next year. That means nothing. I will still be on the same team with Sasuke-kun, pig. She exclaimed, hoping she would not be the one left out. Ino just shook her head with a smile and a chuckle, still haven't figured it out, have you? Everyone here besides you is a clan heir. Do you think they will pass on us when they could just push you to the side knowing that your family comes from the civilian side? Ino didn't really think she would be on Sasuke's team. More than likely they would try to recreate her father's team with the clan heirs, seeing as how effective they were in the last war. That still didn't stop her from rubbing it into her rival's face. Sakura looked around at those in the class, and she had to admit that her former friend was right. Fear of being left out or behind started to settle within her. Trying to hide it, she flung herself back into her chair and crossed her arms. Not wanting to admit it, she sighed angrily, we will see about that, Ino Pig. She thought frantically and remembered about 2 others that were supposed to be here in the class as well. If the rumors were true, then the quiet Hyuga girl was supposed to be here too, and somehow the blonde knucklehead of the class passed after the school let out yesterday. Unfortunately, rumors were alive and rampant in the village of the Hyuga disappearing, and the blonde was wanted for questioning in connection with dead bodies found in the shady district of the village. There may be hope after all, she thought. A few moments later, the class door opened up and their teacher entered the room. Uruka-sensei stopped in front of the class and cleared his throat to gather everyone's attention. Class, I will be calling off the names of the new genin teams. Once I am done, you will wait here for your new team captains and senseis to retrieve you. Teams 1 through 6 are still in active status, so we will begin with Team 7. This will be Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, and Sakura Hirano. Sakura took a quick glance at Ino with a look of disappointment for not being on Sasuke's team, but also of being victorious for being assigned a team. Ino looked a little worried then, knowing she had a 25% chance of not being assigned a team now. She was almost certain her chances were smaller than that, since the village would not pass up placing Sasuke in a team. Since he was from the Uchiha clan, they would want to do so as soon as possible, and she was lower on the grading curve than the other 2 students. Team 7 will be led by Kurenai Yuhi, Uruka continued. Next is Team 8 led by Asuma Sarutobi. This will be Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka. Both girls looked at each other in amazement. Their vision of each other was quickly obscured by a boy's body slamming his hand down on the desk in front of him. What the hell about me? What team am I supposed to be on? You cannot leave me without a team. I demand to know why this happened, he exclaimed. Uruka didn't even look up from his paper. Yes, Sasuke Uchiha, knowing that this would happen. Sasuke was a demanding student, always thinking he was better than everyone else, and often took pleasure in proving it to those who would think otherwise. You are to report to the Hokage tomorrow to discuss your further training. Your new senseis will be in shortly to retrieve you. After the last statement, he left the class. Sasuke, who was taking the news in a horrible fashion, kicked the chair behind him and left the class as well, while everyone stood in the room with their mouths agape. The famed Uchiha had been passed up for a team. The afternoon. His mind drifted from all the events that have taken place. He was not a proud man at the current moment, and there was little in the room to offer him any boost in his morale. Eruptions of arguments crossed the large table as accusations and debate flew from mouth to ear with no sense of order. After his earlier meeting with his student, there were a lot of ideas that passed through his mind. Looking back at that conversation, there was a small spark of fire starting in his chest. How could he not see what has happened to himself over these many years? He was once a great man, leader, and a god of shinobi. Now he is a shadow of his former self. He wasn't sure if it was the earlier meeting with Jiraiya or if his sanity was finally being pushed too far. Enough, he bellowed. Silence took a hold of the camber as everyone looked the Hokage. In recent memory they have never heard the old man speak as such to the council. He paused to ensure that everyone knew how serious matters were now, and that things were going to start changing at a rapid pace. I know it is late, and for that I apologize. This is not a meeting so you may endlessly bicker to each other like women in a bathhouse. I am the Hokage, and although I have seemed to let my sanity slip and forgotten my role in this village, leaving most of you to corrupt the values of generation past, I will look past this and we will start anew right here. Mouths hung open. Even Shikaku was paying attention now. The wording was hard to put together, and they were not sure if they were being insulted or not. What gives you the right to speak to us as such, and make accusations that we are corrupt? A portly man from the civilian side chose to utter his ignorance. A scowl crossed Hiruzen's face as he started to stand, getting more attention and serious looks from the other members in the room. There was an interruption though as he was ready to stalk toward the man in the sound of a large thump from the door that had been sealed to prevent others from entering and eavesdropping. There was another loud boom before the doors fell forward in a cloud of dust and shrapnel. Because he is the Hokage, and you are nothing more than a sniveling worm that feeds off the suffering of others to gain the insignificant little bit of power you only think you have attained, a voice from the cloud said in a tone that dared those to argue the fact. Only a few people could put a face to that voice, and the Hokage sighed as he knew this was inevitable. For those that were in the know of the shinobi ways, the room was sealed in some of the most powerful fuinjutsu that the village had to offer. To just come through it as if you were just knocking on the door meant that you were just that powerful, or that pissed. This person was both. A large hulk of a man that most had known to only wear a smile walked through the cloud with a sneer as he looked at those seated at the table. His long white hair swayed back and forth lightly behind him as his wooden sandals clacked along the floor as he walked further. What is the meaning of this sensei? Hiyashi stated. Jiraiya whipped his head around toward the voice and pinned his former student down with a glare. This is about how this village treats its own people. How you all have become so bloated in your own egos, you have forgotten that you are here to serve them and protect them. That is exactly what we are doing here. Before your rude interruption, we were in discussions on how we were going to go about protecting the village from that demon child, Mebuki stated in a haughty tone. It was almost in an instant, as if he had mastered the fourth's technique, he was at her seat, gripping her by the throat. It wasn't enough to cut off the flow of air or blood, but was more than enough to make it very painful. Speak of that child again in such a manner and the next discussion you will be having will be with the Shinigami on how you soiled yourself even while your head was crammed in your ass. He flung her from the chair she was sitting in and used her seat as a step to stand upon the table. He wanted everyone's undivided attention, even to the woman that was lying on the ground gasping for air while rubbing her neck. It seems to me that promises here in Konoha have not been kept, Jiraiya stated with a sneer at the Hokage. Much to his surprise, the old man had a small smile on his face. I have been away from the village for these last 13 years, protecting her from all forms of hostile intentions. Kumo was ready to march on our doorstep after the attack of the Kyubi, thinking us too weak to defend ourselves after such a slaughter. With the death of Minato, Iwa was finally frothing at the mouth to take vengeance against the village that was the home of the Yellow Flash. Even Suna, who is an ally, was tempted to take advantage of our weakened state in an attempt to procure some land for more fertile resources. He looked around the room to make sure that everyone knew that without his work, they would have fallen long ago. As I stood at the spot where our beloved Hokage and his wife gave their lives to save this village, a promise was made to me while I held a small child in my arms. It was not only a promise to me but the fulfillment of the last wish of the Hokage, to protect and care for his son, and see him for the true hero that he is. It didn't take long for them to piece the words together before someone spoke out. Minato Namikaze didn't have a child. Hiashi spoke out. It was no secret that Hiashi and Minato were on the same genin team that was trained by Jiraiya. He would have known if his teammate would have been expecting a child. The pregnancy was concealed from the public because the mother had special circumstances that would have jeopardized the entire village should something go wrong, the sage said. In fact, the reason you allow the villagers to torture Naruto is why Kushina's pregnancy was classified. Konoha has had the Kyubi sealed within someone since near its inception. The first person was none other than the first Hokage's wife, Mito Senju. It was then transferred to Kushina, Minato's wife, before Mito passed away. Minato, in a desperate attempt to save this wretched village, sealed it into his own son on the day of his birth after his wife and himself were dying from protecting Naruto. A fist slammed down on the table near where Jiraiya was standing. Why were we not notified of this? Inoichi questioned. Because the civilian council sealed those records from the public records and future councils, Hiruzen spoke after listening to everything. Jiraiya turned to the aged Hokage and walked down the table to and looked upon his sensei, and that is why I am so pissed right now. You are the Hokage of this village, you have all the power, and you did nothing to stop this. I spent years looking out toward our enemies, ensuring that they would never seek to attack us. Little did I know that the biggest threat to my family was within these walls. A thin man who had been listening to everything with a regal appearance decided to add his two ryo to the discussion. You speak in a tone that is threatening to the village. That is tantamount to treason. Like I give a shit after everything you have done to my godson, Jiraiya said as he walked over the civilian councilman. Sitting on his heels, he stared deep into his eyes. What are you going to do if I said I was threatening the village? Are you going to detain me? Haul me to the interrogation building for a little of your re-education classes? He asked. I would like to see you try. Standing once more, he walked to the center of the table. I will be leaving the village though, but not to return to my network. I will be following and finding my godson. I have a good idea where he is heading. Then you will be returning to the village? Sum asked. Jiraiya shook his head. No, I will be training him and his young girlfriend. We may return, but it definitely won't be for some time. But believe me when I say this, when and if we return, there will be hell to pay, especially to those that sit in this room. Hiashi tensed at the mention of his daughter being involved with the demon child. There will be no such thing as my daughter fraternizing with that thing. A grin spread across the white-haired man's face that sent chills down everyone's back. Normally I would just take your head for referring to Naruto as a thing. I will let that slide because what I offer you now will cause you more pain than I could ever inflict on you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package that looked like it had been wrapped as a gift in fine paper. Hiashi caught the package and reopened it. It had been opened before to check the contents. Looking at the item, Hiashi paled. Inside the small box was a photo frame that was decorated with a small frog on the upper left and lower right corners. The photo was the cause of the proud Hyuga's distress though. It was a picture of his daughter with a timid smile, very reminiscent of his dead wife's smile. Written on the photo in very elegant handwriting was the words, "To Naruto, I love you." Hokage, Hiashi yelled. You must send out a search team immediately and bring my daughter back, alive or dead, it matters not to me. Under no circumstance may that tainted boy sully the Hyuga bloodline. What is wrong, my student? Don't tell me that you are afraid. Jiraiya asked. The venom and sarcasm was thick in his voice. Now what could the great and mighty Hiashi Hyuga ever be afraid of, I wonder? Oh, I think I know. Maybe it might be the prospect of pale-eyed, blonde-haired children running around. The Sannin leaned in closer to his former student, reeling in the misery that was spread across the face of the head of the Hyuga clan. That's right, blonde, pale-eyed children without your oh-so-precious seal to mar the skin of their forehead. Jiraiya could practically see the foam dripping from Hiashi's mouth. You know, I wonder what they would eventually try and the sounds they would create if I happened to gift them with a set of my limited edition, signed copy of my series. Your daughter looks shy, but I bet she is a screamer. That was the breaking straw to the Hyuga clan head as he lunged at his former teacher. Some would say his eyes turned red from rage as he went for a killing strike. The elder man merely swatted the strike away and brought up his own hand. Within his hand was a swirling orb of concentrated chakra, one that Jiraiya slammed into the right side of Hiashi's chest. When the technique connected, it caused the clan head to be launched from his lunging position to the far wall where he slumped upon impact. I am truly disappointed in you, Hiashi. As one of my students you should have known better, the Sannin growled out. I will take my leave now, Hiruzen, but if or when I return I would expect there to be some redeeming qualities in this village. With that, Jiraiya hopped off of the table and made his way to the door. Just before he passed through the doorway he looked back one last time and shook his head in disappointment and regret. Later that night, near an open field far away from the prying eyes of Konoha or any other village for that matter, two young teens were fast asleep. Comfortable in the thought that they were in an area that they were safe from anyone that would be pursuing them. They stayed just in the tree line of a forest, only covered by the roots of a fallen tree. The boy laid out more in the open, his orange pants evident against the green of the grassy ground. There almost seemed to be a defensive nature to his body as he slept, as if he had been trained throughout the years to be aware of threats even while asleep. Protected by the roots of the tree slept a young teenage girl. She appeared comfortable as she was wrapped in a light fabric that resembled a sheet. Under the fabric she was wearing a pair of recently acquired baggy brown pants and a loose-fitting shirt. Also covering her torso was an orange jacket that matched the jacket of the pants that the boy was wearing. Throughout their travel to reach this location they happened upon a village where the young man had snuck into the yards of several people to gain the articles that they were now in possession of. The boy, Naruto, did not care much for taking what did not belong to him, but it was necessary given their current status and recent events. He kept a memory of where he had taken each article of clothing or cloth, that way when he returned to this village once again, maybe while traveling he would be able to repay them for the involuntary sacrifice that they undertook. After a few crusts of bread and the little meat he could find from the village they ate in relative silence, but thinking the same thing, what now? They both knew the direction they were heading was leading them to the northeast border of Hai no Kuni. If they stayed on the current course they would likely be entering Yu no Kuni in the next few days as long as they kept their strength up. A fear was creeping up Hinata though as they were continuously getting closer to Kaminari no Kuni and eventually Kumo. This was same Kumo that tried to kidnap her nearly a decade ago and would likely attempt it again if she was found within their borders. Naruto could not describe the voice that continuously told him to go in that direction, but it had kept him safe up to this point, and ahead of the pursuers. He was not happy about what he did to Hinata, leaving some sort of mark on her chest, but was still happy she was safe. When he inquired to the voice on why it was necessary, or what it meant, the voice would remain silent or tell him he would understand in time. As Naruto laid there in restless slumber, trying to forget about the recent event from his home village, and the situation they were currently entangled in, he was jolted from his sleep by an ear-piercing scream. From a laying position he assumed a defensive stance, quickly trying to clear the particles from his eyes and he scanned the area for the source of the threats. The darkness enveloped the area with faint outline of nature penetrating his eyes first. The first row of trees in front of him that separated them from the open field beyond, concealing their location from those that may stumble upon the area they were in. Other trees dotted his vision to the left and right, but no threats were seen in any of those directions. Quickly he spun around to peer into the nest of roots where his female companion was supposed to be resting comfortably. There were no perpetrators in the small natural alcove, but the girl there was thrashing, and it seemed she was doing it in her sleep. It was a little strained considering that she was wrapped in the sheet he had taken to help keep her warm in the event that it would be cold at night, or they would need to construct some form of cover. But the whimpers and panicked breathing were definitely noticeable. Relaxing his guard a little, Naruto got down on his hands and knees to enter the confined space to check on the petite girl. Upon closer inspection, his heart was breaking at the pain that was playing its way across her face. She was in the throes of a nightmare, likely reliving the events of the attack. For the life of him, he had never dreamed of the attacks on his person. He had heard at some points people that suffered under a lot of trauma often did relive them in dreams, but he did not. He remembered the attacks, all of them in fact, but never suffered the debilitating nightmares that Hinata was now suffering with. The most recent attack was a little fuzzy though, but he remembers being on the brink of death before she appeared and was quickly in the same situation he had found himself in. By the way, she was not wearing any clothes. It was likely that they had tried to rape her as well. "Don't hurt him. Don't hurt Naruto-kun," she shouted in her sleep. His heart clenched in his chest at her slumbering declaration. Here was Hinata, in the throes of a nightmare with her body being broken within her dream realm, and she screams for his safety. Reaching out, he strokes the dirty yet soft skin of her cheek. Instantly, as if her body acts of its own will, she inches closer to the source of the warm hand that caressed her. Naruto smiled as she unconsciously settled her head onto his lap while he ran a hand through her short hair repeatedly, finding solace in the silky feeling passing through his fingers. As time passed, he grew more tired but did not want to leave her side as it seemed the nightmares ceased when she was near him. Gently moving her and repositioning himself, he finally made it to a lying position while she rested her head upon his chest. Before sleep took him once again, he looked down at the face of the young Hyuga and could make out the faint outlines of a smile spread across her lips. 4 days later. It had taken Jiraiya 4 days to prepare for his long journey. He needed to acquire supplies not only for himself but for the 2 teens he was going to be tracking. There was also a great amount of information that he needed to collect as well. He had been absent of the village for so long, keeping his eyes and ears facing any possible threat that might come to the village. As mad as he was at his old sensei, he was even more furious with himself. He was blind to and absent to the one person that should have taken priority over everything else in his life. If he had to admit it, he would have likely made a different decision 13 years prior, knowing just a fraction of what he knew now. The spy network he so diligently held in place would have been dissolved unless a replacement could have been found. He was certain that under his tutelage, his student's son would have graduated well before now. There would be a likely chance that he would have already started teaching him of the frogs in the frog contract. Maybe even visiting Mount Myoboku from time to time to see the elder toads and be introduced to sage training. Instead, he was standing here, 5 days behind his target, at the gates of Konoha. He didn't want to waste any time, but the wait was necessary, as it would have probably done more harm than good to just try to chase after the 2 without know what to do when he retrieved them. Jiraiya had made a deep investigation within Konoha for any information regarding his godson. Sad as it was to say, there were many more enemies of the boy than there were allies. Some people even disappeared mysteriously over the last few days after he questioned them. Naruto had never left the village previously, that anyone knew of anyway, so there were no destined locations outside the village he would run to, but there was a cause for concern from others though beyond the walls. Evidently the Hyuga clan had put together a clan mission and sent a sizable squad to hunt for the 2 teens. They were not a threat personally to him, but they were rumored to have received kill-on-sight orders and had a 2-day advantage over him. There was also the fact that just because he did not have any allies beyond the walls did not mean that he did not have any enemies either. The last known direction their trail was found at was north by northwest. If they continued on that path, it would likely take them right near the border with Iowa. The people of Konoha may be blinded by their hate and rage, but it would be idiotic to think that the shinobi of Iowa would be that blind. From the images that he had retrieved of the boy, he was a spitting image of his father, minus the whisker marks, of course. The young girl would have very little to fear. Iowa was very indifferent about those with Keki Genkai, neither praising them nor scorning them. It was just a simple policy of if a shinobi had one, and then it was a benefit, otherwise unimportant. But if there was a change that a shinobi saw Minato within Naruto, the best case scenario would be a capture with a public execution. Worst case was likely to happen if the person was near the age to remember the war and the battles the Yellow Flash participated in. A chill trickled down Jiraiya's spine at the thought. It would be a result in a painful torture in the field where they would likely kill him slowly. The sadly funny thing is, it would be no different than what his home village has attempted to do to him from time to time. Just as Jiraiya was ready to leave, the Hokage appeared before him, knowing that this would likely be the last time he would see his former student. Jiraiya, he started off. If you are here to apologize, old man, save it. I told you I don't want any of your, I'm sorry, or, I did the best I could. You and I both know that is a load of crap. Jiraiya cut him off. Here's insight at the situation. You are right, it would be. But I have a request of you while you are away this time. The Sanin's temper flared. Have you not already asked enough of me, Hokage-sama? He hissed out. It is not for me. The old man yelled in return. If this is likely the last time he saw his best student ever again, he wanted to make a request that would only benefit him. When you find young Naruto, please give him my sincerest regrets for the mistakes of this old man. You can do that in a few years yourself. I will not apologize in your stead for the atrocities you allowed to happen to a young child, he stated. If too much time has passed and I am unable to, please do this for an old man. And that leads me to my second request. If anything is to happen to me, I have nominated you to take my place as Hokage, Hiruzen added. I refuse. The tone was flat and hollow. The Hokage was shocked that his student would refuse such an honor, but why? If I was to take that hat from you tomorrow, I would seal everyone within the village and burn it to the ground. There was no remorse in his voice. It was as if his soul had been sucked from his body and he cared not for his home any longer. You would be better off dragging Tsunade back, getting her to stop gambling and drinking to take up the job. If you start now, it may only take you a few years to find her. That should be a suitable sentence. A few more years behind that hell you call a desk. Then I may tell him you're sorry, if you make the remainder of your time there worthwhile. Without another word, Jiraiya walked down the path, disappearing beyond the horizon. The aged Hokage sighed once again, feeling as if his world had started to come to a stop. His best student was more than furious with him. His charge was under self-banishment because of his lack of response to the needs of the child. The most prominent clan in the village was in an uproar that more wasn't being done to secure their precious bloodline, and he had failed to keep the dying wish of the fourth Hokage. Slowly he turned and started the long trek back to his office, despair making a home deep in his heart. He needed an outlet, and there was one taking place in about an hour that has become the focus of his attention. A council meeting was to be held, and it would likely be another meeting to complain about the last loyal Uchiha not being placed on a team. He may be too old for the field of battle anymore, but in that room he was quickly gaining the respect he once had, and today he would take another step up that ladder, but cutting off the legs of power from the council members that had assisted in putting him in this position. The border. It was near noon when the two young teens reached the gorge that separated the two lands. Beyond the chasm and across the bridge in front of them lay the next step in their lives. Naruto paused as he stared at the expanse. Up until recently he had never left the village of his home. Now here he was, a 5-day travel from those protective walls, ready to cross into another land altogether. It terrified him how much has changed and the uncertainty that they had yet to face. They have survived up until now, stealing some clothing for Hinata from the first village they had come across so she could travel more comfortably, and without embarrassment. Any other survival techniques were nothing more than simple hunting and looking for shelter when they slept. Once they crossed this bridge they would be in Kuni, the land of hot springs. The voice within him had been pushing him in this direction, and as far as he could tell they were not being followed anymore. They may have finally evaded their pursuers, at least for the time being. They may be able to take a few days to relax to regain their strength so they could travel again. When Hinata had noticed the direction they had been heading toward, she had told the blonde that she had visited the country when she was younger with her family. Being a prestigious clan, the Hyugas would often vacation here from time to time in the past, and they still had active accounts with one of the more luxurious resorts in the small nation. Her hope was that if they could, without being discovered first, find the resort near the capital of Yugakure to get cleaned up and rested. They may be able to get some supplies, charging it to the clan account, before they left once again. When Naruto voiced his concern over leaving a trail such as a charge to an account that will notify her family of her nearby location, she dismissed him. She informed him that it would take several months before the clan would receive any notice of account activity from the resort, by then they would be long gone. That did not mean that they wanted to stay for a prolonged time. 2 or 3 days would do to get what they need before they left the area and continued northeast once more, under the guidance of Naruto's inner voice. Hinata did voice her concern about heading into Kaminari no Kuni and told her companion of the story from her childhood. Naruto tried his best to reassure her by stating that they should be able to stay away from the main village and stick to the shoreline on the east side of the country. Once they were to leave the resort they would travel directly east through Shimo no Kuni till they reached the shore and follow it through the mountains and cliffs throughout Kaminari. With any luck they would likely see a few small fishing villages and possibly no shinobi. Naruto was brought out of his musings when a small soft hand wrapped around his and gave it a gentle squeeze. He looked over into her pale eyes and couldn't hold back the smile despite the fear that tugged at him. He nodded to her and silently they began their crossing of the bridge that would hopefully take them to a better life.